Hi everyone, Natalie here, back again. Another transfer special. Kathryn's here with us today from the Daily Mail. Hi everyone for getting in the comments. I can see you already in and waiting. Kathryn, thanks for joining us. Just tell us about how you're feeling now. I suppose the season's over, transfer window, it's all starting, kind of, and then obviously the Euros. So how is it now for you guys?
It's strange because you get into a routine of WSL match every weekend, building up to that and stuff going on, and then obviously the season ends and you've got a strange period where the tournament's coming up, so you've got to prepare for that and get everything in order, and then I guess kind of try and have a little bit of a break as well. But as we both know, there's also still stuff going on in the background with WSL clubs as well. So it's a bit of a strange time, but I am trying to sort of enjoy a little bit of a break before it gets hectic next month.
Yeah, it's going to get hectic soon. Just saying hi to everyone. Vicky, Lanzel, Sporty Box. I don't know. I just want to get straight into it then. Is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. The one place that we've talked about, I suppose, before, and I think a lot of people want to know because I think she did a comment just before we were about to play. Lyon were about to play Barcelona. Signe Bruun, she came for 6 months. She probably didn't, well, she admitted, didn't go as well as she wanted. She had a lot of injuries, but there was still an option there. We had Emma on last week saying, I know they're still looking at it. Mark in his press conference says she's still an option. And you obviously told me today, and I know there's going to be a tweet, but, just talk to us about Signe. Where do you see, what do you think is going to happen with that one?
Yeah, Signe's not going to come back to United. That's pretty much decided now. I think that's probably been in the last week or so. In terms of her future elsewhere, still undecided whether she'll stay at Lyon or she could go elsewhere. She could go to another club in the WSL, but it's not going to be United. I think complicated by the fact that she's still under contract with Lyon. Obviously, they would want a fee, and Lyon being Lyon, is probably going to be on the higher end of that fee, which I don't think United would be prepared to pay. So, unfortunately for United fans that were hoping that she was going to come back, obviously that's not the case, sadly. But whether she goes to another club or not, I know that would probably be a harder pill to swallow if you saw a sign for someone else in the WSL. But again, it's still sort of very much up on the air on that.
Just might as well just get it out of the way. United are cheapskates. What do you think it is that they don't want to sign her? Do you think it's because it's not been as great for her?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one because if she'd come in on that loan and scored 10, 15 goals or something like that, I think the club would the hand would have been forced to say, right, we at least need to go and make an offer. Because it was difficult because she didn't get much game time of injuries. She obviously, the games that she did have, struggled a little bit, probably because of a lack of fitness. They probably weren't sure. They probably weren't guaranteed that she's a striker, that if they go and sign her, she'll score 15 to 20 goals in a season. So I think probably a little bit on that front, they were not sure, and that's probably why they don't want to pay the fee. Obviously, if she does go to another club and she hits the ground running there, that will look like a bad decision, but she could go to another club and have similar issues. If that injury record, whether that's part of it or not, I guess that's probably the case. Also, they might have identified other options that they think might be better suited to their system and style as well.
Just on the places that I've heard that she could go, I've heard Everton might be an option. I don't know how much you know about that, but the Danish coach that they're getting in has worked with her before. Obviously, yeah, you talk about she might not do it. She might not do it there. But obviously, for me, I think Emma said last week, maybe what about a loan again, or a 6 month loan, or is that just sort of totally off the plate?
Yeah, I would say so. I say that's probably not that's very, very slim chance. It would only be if something maybe went wrong with another option that might be a last kind of resort. But I think it's unlikely that would happen. Everton, I think would be an option for her. Obviously, you mentioned the coach as well, that we know she has worked with a club where she would probably go in and play as well. You're looking at if it was to be one of the top three, I think she'd find it difficult to just go and walk into one of their starting, that starting 11, especially Arsenal and Chelsea, maybe Man City with if Ellen White's sort of not playing as much, but you've still got Bunny Shaw there. So I think it would be difficult for her to go in and get a regular starting place. But Everton, obviously, she probably would get that, and they need a striker and they need goals. Obviously, based on last season, not a direct rival with United. I think it's fair to say. Obviously, they have ambitions of getting in the top three. A lot was spoken about that last year. Fell quite badly short. But they will have that ambition to do it again this season. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was somewhere she did end up.
I mean, there's this on the screen. Everton will spend, and then they're the bottom, but we won't, and we're sort of just on the cusp. I mean, Namrat is saying, "Give us some good news." But it does seem that way. I'm not going to lie to everyone. It does seem like Man United, and there's another name I'm going to touch on in a bit, but it does seem like they don't want to pay. I mean, Emma said, I know I'm keep going back to Emma, but this is just, I suppose, what we're hearing. Mark was talking a lot about investment towards the end of the season, his press conferences. But he sort of said something in the last press conference, like, we're just setting a budget. And I was thinking, how can you be deciding a budget? So surely these things are not done in advance. So it sort of sounds like he's pushing for funds, whether they're deciding differently. I mean, just your take on that in terms of sort of, like I had people saying they're not spending money and they promised all this after Casey, but it just doesn't seem to be what's happening.
I think what you've got to remember is we're still very early on in the transfer window, and we know kind of from the past, and United don't do things necessarily quickly. They do take their time, they take a bit longer. Even appointing Mark last season as manager took a while. He then subsequently didn't have as long to try and get players in that he wanted. I think the situation over at the men's side of things as well complicates things, because they're obviously sorting a lot of stuff out there with the manager, his budget, setting that. And unfortunately, with the way these things go, the women's teams always are the next step. They're, sort the men's team out first, and then we'll look at the women's team. So I think that's probably part of the delay. If the new manager hadn't come in on the men's side, maybe that would be a bit more straightforward. I think they're also going to be working with a lower budget, is what I've kind of been told. They're not going to be spending, as much as we maybe saw them spend last summer. They're going to be reduced as well, which has a knock-on effect to the women's budget also. But again, what I would say is that, as I say, we're still early on. I think we're still obviously waiting for that director of football to come in on the women's side. I think once that happens, and once you've got a dedicated person to look after the women's team, maybe we'll see things happen a little bit quicker. But at the current time, until that happens, it'll always be a case of priorities, sort one thing out first, then sort of move on to the women's. And until you've got that figurehead, maybe it might still be that situation.
I mean, someone just popped up. What's the news regarding the director of football? I know I've heard rumours there might be someone from abroad who, is of the calibre that, say, United fans want. But just what you've heard, Kathryn, if anything.
Yeah, a couple of different things. I've been sort of told that it was going to be a woman. That don't know who.
Oh,
but that,
I've heard that too.
Sort of,
so that's we're on the same page.
Yeah. Again, I think they know who they've got. Again, it's just that slow process of crossing the T's, dotting the I's, getting everything in place. And you would expect her to, or them to come in the start of pre-season, be announced, hopefully get their feet under the table and look at obviously things with Mark where they want to go. And you would hope that once that happens, that it would kind of instigate things to move a little bit more quicker.
Yeah, it does seem like that, which is sad to see, because I think that's why Casey sort of left. It was the whole seen as the second, and I think women's football fans, they know Man United is a big club. The men's team bring in all the revenue. No one's saying sort of, they should have equal kind of pay or anything, but it's just the equal standards, it's the equal determination, it's the equal ambition. You know, seen in your paper, in other papers, the fans forum, and I'm not saying that there's not a women's team representative, but it seems to be all very much like focused on the men's. The men's are protesting, the men's fans feel like this, but I mean, just from, I suppose, what you see, Kathryn, the women's fans, seeing people saying we're so frustrated, but it's not like we're not patient. It's just, I think we were promised this was going to be a big thing and we were going to get Champions League, and it just always seems to fall, doesn't it? And, you know, you can see how close they are, but, you know, Mark was pushing all season, investment. I suppose that's different in Casey in a way. She just sort of didn't really come out and was so obvious about it, but he's sort of been very obvious and said what needs to be done, and it just seems to be slow.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned it to you before. I think sometimes United are reactive instead of being proactive, especially in the transfer window a little bit, and even when it sort of comes to contracts and things like that. I think, yeah, we've heard Mark talk about that a lot. We heard him talk about it back in November, earlier on in the season, ahead of January. I think that was, you know, a key point. Obviously, brought a couple of people in January, but it wasn't, you know, spending necessarily that much. And then we've seen him sort of say it towards the end of the season as well. I think the owners know that Mark wants, you know, a budget to work with, because as you mentioned, you are so close. You got closer than you did the season before. And, you know, it's small margins in the women's games. It doesn't take much to propel you one position in the table. It's only maybe a couple of players, a little bit more here, a little bit more there. And the only thing I would say, what I did notice second half of the season, was the kind of the presence of directors and people on the United board at women's games more often. Obviously, you would expect them to be there at the Old Trafford game, which they were. Richard Arnold was there, John Murtagh was there. John Murtagh was at the game against Chelsea at Kingsmeadow, which I think was, you know, felt sort of, it was quite nice to see him there. Clearly, sort of, you know, taken an interest at least, and hopefully, as you say, when, you know, the new director of football comes in, they can, you know, talk to Mark, explain, you know, discuss whatever the budget is, whether that's already been set or whether it's still not been set. Hopefully, you know, they can, as you say, identify the targets that Mark wants. That's also a case of, are they the targets that Mark wants? Are they the targets that does it depend on, you know, is it just a case of which players are available? You don't always know, because I did get the feeling that Signe Bruun wasn't necessarily a Mark signing, not to say that he didn't want her, but I think it was more a case of she was available on loan at that time, and it seemed to make sense. I don't think it was sort of like a player that Mark really wanted, and maybe that's also the reason why the club haven't gone out full out for her. If Mark's not said, I want her, they're probably not going to go and say, right, we'll pay a fee to get her.
Well, coming back to that, another one that we speak about, Kathryn, or we've spoken about, not a Mark signing, but there was an article, I think Alan, who is Stina's agent, said that we did go for another client of theirs, and I have it on good authority that client was Caitlin Foord. She's the picture here. We know about Caitlin Foord. She's out of contract. She's not signed a new contract. Heard that Man United were or are or interested. Were interested definitely in January. Good authority, had that on. But it seems again they've missed out, or they're going to miss out. Just your thoughts on Caitlin Foord, and if she is sort of more maybe who Mark wanted, and if it's Mark wants her. There's quotes from his time at Orlando just raving about her. So, you know, it's well documented then that he does like her as a player. If that's the kind of player that he likes, what's happened there, just from what you know?
Yeah, again, I feel like I'm the bearer of bad news tonight, but what I've heard similar to you, that Caitlin Foord is a player United wanted, were interested in, or a player that Mark is a big fan of, as he said publicly, as we know, out of contract, so that made it easier because there's no fee involved. But I think the latest is, obviously, she's a player that they've had. I think she's had so many offers from clubs kind of, you know, all over Europe. what I'm sort of been told is that she's probably more likely to extend with Arsenal and probably stay there, although it's not decided yet. It's still up in the air. But I think it's more likely that she'll probably stay at Arsenal. I think Juventus were obviously one of the clubs that were sort of pushing as well. She'd previously worked with Joan Montemurro, would be a good fit there. But I think at the minute it's looking more likely that she'll stay at Arsenal. But as I say, not completely done yet. What did interest me was that obviously we knew she'd been out of contract for a while. Steph Caitlin, who's also Australian, signed a new deal, and I thought it was a bit strange that if Caitlin was going to sign a new deal, maybe the delay meant she might go elsewhere. But I think it's probably just a case of, without being disrespectful to Caitlin, she probably didn't have as many offers as Foord probably does, so she probably has a bit more to think about. And I think there was frustrations from Ford's point of view back in January on Arsenal's kind of slowness, like other clubs, in terms of extending and offering a new contract. And I think that's maybe why she's not signed it yet, because there was sort of frustration that Arsenal was slower to make that move. But obviously she came back from the Asia Cup, played quite a key role in Arsenal's second half of the season, was in really good form. Jonas obviously came out and said he wanted her to stay. I think he's probably made quite a big play for her to stay, and I think that's probably what she wanted at the start of the season. It's just taken Arsenal a bit of time to kind of show willing to offer a new deal, but looks like she's more likely to stay there, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Lanzel's saying here, do you think Champions League football is impacted on, say, someone like Caitlin Foord, or do you think it's maybe Arsenal are playing a lot more, or what do you think the reasons, or do you think it's a bit of both?
I'd say probably a bit of both. I think it's only natural that not having Champions League football is always going to affect things, but I think in the name of United, I think sometimes makes up for that in a way. I think the badge, sometimes it doesn't always matter as much in terms of having Champions League, but yeah, for someone like Caitlin Foord, who's sort of been around for a while, she would probably want to be playing in that competition. And I also think, it's probably offering maybe a little bit more money at Arsenal. She's also probably settled in London. She'd have to move. She's got, as I say, a fellow Australian in Steph Caitlin is probably just more, maybe a bit of convenience. But again, I don't know how much of a big play United made at interest, but how much they sort of followed up on that, I'm not sure.
Okay, interesting, because that definitely seems like one that Mark wanted. And if they're not making a big play for the ones he wants, then yeah. I just want to touch, because we talked about, and I can see all the questions, and I am going to get onto other teams as well. I can see Liverpool fans in there already asking, so I will get onto everyone. But I just want to touch on, we're talking about forwards here. You said no to Bruni, you said no to Foord. So then I think of one of our own, that's how I class her, Alessia Russo. And we're talking about slow contracts and all this kind of thing. And it makes me nervous, I'm not going to lie. It makes me think, what are you doing? Because I think if we lost her, I think she's got a 1-year option, I'm pretty sure they've activated everyone's options, that are on 1 year, so people have to pay. But for me, Leslie should be on the same contract as Tooney. Whatever Tooney's on, 5 years, 6 years, whatever, get it boxed. And I just think, someone's here, Harry's saying, if Russo goes, I fear for the women's team. And I think, I said to Emma last week, the song is Tooney and Leslie Russo, build. It's what Man United should be about, the future. Lanzel's saying, what's the situation just on, I suppose, Alessia and all of them? But I think for me, Alessia is the biggest one for United fans now. I think Jackie goes, we'd be upset. If Anna goes, we kind of know she's probably going to go. But Alessia, if you can't tie that up, then serious issues, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I know there's always been that background interest from clubs in America sort of been going on, but from my understanding back then when the initial interest came in was that she was happy at United, wasn't really too interested in leaving. I think it's, again, I don't think it's going to be one that's sorted necessarily quickly, having the Euros probably complicates things as well in terms of times, having the ability to sit down, maybe discuss certain things. And obviously the fact that she is a player that would get interest from elsewhere means she's worth a bit more. She's worth a bit more in wages. She's worth a bit more in other stuff as well. But I'd be surprised if they didn't get that locked down on a contract. I think the inference I get is that she would want to stay. It's a club that she supports. She came back from America, to play for United, because that's the club that she loves, and you can really kind of tell that when she plays. I would think unless something drastically goes wrong, or the club sort of just don't make a good offer, I think I would expect her to stay. As I say, unless one of the American clubs kind of blows it out of the water and it's too good to turn down. But I think she wants to stay, and as long as the clubs do their part, then I think we should see her at United next season.
That was one that I was worried about. I know people are saying, I mean, what's your take on Jackie? Because that's one that a lot of people are a bit as well. What's happening? Is she staying or going? I've heard that she's got a lot of interest too. What's your views?
Yeah, it's a similar one. Maybe less tied to the club, and obviously I think you get the impression that she's very much loves the fans, loves the club, but maybe a little bit less of a tie to the ones that are born here and have grown up loving the club. Again, I think it's just a case of it's a similar situation to Honour as to whether they trigger the 1 year, knowing they'll probably leave the next year, and it's whether you try and get that fee, how significant that would be. Also depends on the player, whether they want to sign a new contract, whether the club want to offer them a new contract, whether that new contract would tie up with what she could get elsewhere. Again, I think it's one that we might not know about until the Euros are done, and that could also, she could get injured in the Euros. She could get a bad injury. She could play really well and then get more offers. It's one of them. I think again, sort of up in the air, and not one that was probably going to be sorted, in the near future probably.
Kathryn, we need some good news, mate. The only good news that I do know, and I'm seeing people asking a lot, and as far as I'm aware, she is going to join, but it could be like you say again after the Euros. But Lucia Garcia, I don't know if you've heard of that one being linked to Man United or anything happening with that, or just any player that or I mean, I know Mark's talked about the areas that he wants: centre back. Obviously, if Honour goes, you'd have to get a full back in again. He's talked about midfield, 10, striker. But where do you probably seen a lot of, spoke to Mark a lot, know what he's kind of looking at. What kind of areas and what kind of players could you see joining Man United? And I suppose the number, because Emma said yesterday 3 or 4, and I was thinking, I'm thinking 5 or 6. So what about you? What are you thinking that Man United fans should expect this window?
Yeah, I mean, I think Mark wants a player for players for the spine of the team. So as you mentioned, striker, central midfield, and probably a centre back, and then it's a case of where else you can, other options that are available in terms of whether you do have to go out and buy a right back, whether you do have to go out and buy another centre midfielder, a winger necessarily. But I think I would say that those 3 in the middle, striker, midfield, centre back, are the 3 key ones, and then it might be a case of whatever else we can do is a bonus. And on terms of Garcia, I think I'd heard snippets of she's a name that's been thrown about a little bit in terms of interest from English clubs. I think one that United are one, and I've not heard massive amounts other than that she's got interest, and I think, as I say, United are one of those clubs. I think she would fit quite well, sort of having a look into her style of play and the type of football that Mark plays. I think it would be a fit. I could see her going in. Doesn't necessarily mean it will happen, but I think she would be a player that would fit sort of Mark's style. So hopefully that's one you can get over the line. But as you say, things can change quickly. If other clubs come in as well. It's the same with a player like Russo. Things can change quickly. Again, if it's not sorted before the Euros, and then she goes and scores the winning goal in the final or something like that, and suddenly 6 different clubs are knocking on the door. You don't know, and that's why as a fan you always want your club to do things early on. But United aren't the only club that have been slow and have maybe going to pay the consequence of that. There's a few clubs that have done the same. That when you don't tie players down in time, you risk losing them. And I mean, we've seen with your neighbours over on the blue side that can sometimes happen.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I'm gonna do a bit of Northwest, but people are saying I look anxious. A lot of extensions. What like you say, what happens? It's just a waiting game, and I just feel like with the men's side that they're terrible at it as well. So if they're then prioritising the men, it's just disgrace in my opinion. But that's me. Let's talk about the blue side, because some people are saying it's not an exodus. Vicky's saying let's all have a good laugh now. Yeah, because I feel like United had a lot of players leave, and everything, it was with, finished club, let's wind up, the winding order, close the club down kind of talk. And then now City, the same thing's happening. But what I will say, City are briefing better and saying, oh no, we're planning. But United always had that plan. United were always going to do this. For me, I think the only one, I don't think anyone was a shock really last year, because you knew Tobin and Kristen were going to go. You knew Lauren wanted to go, and then we got in Hannah instead. So, and I think all those players that came in were basically sorted long before Mark were done, because they were done by Casey. So I don't think they really, I say maybe Nikita Paris, but we're not even, I don't think any Man United fans crying that we didn't sign Nikita Paris, really. What do you think's going on at City? Because Kaz, Bronze, Stanway, something came out that, she didn't get talked to early enough around her contract. And then we're hearing stuff about Walsh, maybe. Obviously, Bronze is gone. They've got rid of some other people. More people might go. Bunny's unhappy. Talk to us, Kathryn. Give us good news.
I think earlier on in the season, City were getting praise because they've got Hemp tied down, they got Kelly tied down, they got Esme Morgan tied down. You sort of looked quite good and comfortable, and then, all of a sudden we get to the end of the season and there's players out of contract. I think Stanway, again, similar to what you were saying, I think there was a disappointment on her side that City hadn't opened discussions before the start of the season when other clubs were already coming in, knowing that she was out of contract. And I think that maybe has cost them slightly. Also, I think, she's going over to the league in Germany, where I think will maybe suit her quite a bit, and she maybe thinks is a good chance to go and develop, maybe more so than it would be staying here. And she also might think, I can come back in a couple of years' time. Caroline Weir, I think, has probably been frustrated this season at maybe lack of game time, not playing maybe as much as she would like, and also she's going to Real Madrid, where it's a club I think she's spoken about before. She'd kind of always dreamed of playing for Real Madrid. Not necessarily that she's going into like Real Madrid that we would expect. She's going into Real Madrid that are, miles off Barcelona. And then Lucy Bronze, again, I think is one that they've let sort of the contract run down and haven't, sorted it out very early. And again, she's I think got the ambition to go and play in America, which she hasn't done yet in her career. She's gone over and won the Champions League with Lyon 3 times. Fancies that move to America because before she's sort of at the end of her career. But also, I think maybe some of these players would have been more likely to stay if, maybe the management side of things. I'm not 100% sure how much of a pull Gareth Taylor has, how much of a say he has in transfers. I sort of don't want to sound, because he's, I think he's a really nice guy. He's only in his second season in the club, but I think if a player, when City sign players, I don't think they sign to play for Gareth Taylor, if you know what I mean. I think they sign because it's maybe a good offer and it's a well-run club, but I don't think they go, I want to go and play for Gareth Taylor, and that's just because he's not as experienced as some of the other managers. I think players that sign for Chelsea, a lot of it's down to I want to go and play for Emma Hayes. Not all of it. Some of it's down to the fact they pay quite well and the fact that they compete, but I think a lot of it's down to I want to go and play for Emma Hayes. And even Mark at United has been in the women's game for a lot longer than Gareth. He's been over in America. He's got that pedigree, and I think he would probably have almost more of a pull management-wise than maybe Gareth would. And I think maybe that can sometimes affect whether players choose to stay or go.
Listen, no holds barred here, Kathryn. Yeah, let's say it as it is. Natalie's sources coming out again in January. Lucy Bronze had a blow up with Gareth Taylor, and there is no love lost there. I think you can even read it with her statement. She didn't thank the club. She only just thanked the players who'd helped her get through turbulent times, and then said obviously about the fans. And it's a bit damning, that statement, in my opinion, considering she was coming back. I'm going to come back and I'm going to be like Wendy Renard and I'm going to win a trophy with City and I can't wait to captain them, etc., etc. And then it seems like this guy Gareth is sort of the reason why a lot of them want to leave. Probably, yeah, they want to leave. I mean, I know City have briefed over footballing reasons, and yeah, she's not been had the greatest season, but she's still a quality player. So I don't think I think that's just to save face, maybe. I mean, what's your take on bust ups, or have you heard anything like that, or you don't even have to say if you worry?
I think a lot of people were. I think we all sort of said in the journalism circle that Gareth deserved a lot of credit for the way City came back, won a trophy after the turbulence that they had. But also, I think you have to kind of appreciate that this is a really good squad, and they should be winning trophies. And it reminds me almost a little bit of Jean-Luc Vasseur at Lyon, where he went in and won everything, and I think he got manager, the European Manager of the Year. But it was, and I don't want to sort of ever downplay that achievement at all, but it almost felt a bit like he was walking into a team of winners, and you don't need to do an awful lot because they know how to win. And almost it felt a bit like that at City, that once those players came back from injury, they know how to win. There's quality players in there. They shouldn't be sort of down mid-table, down struggling at the bottom. And yeah, I mean, I think a few people thought they might have a change of manager. I believe that there was talk over that at one point in the season. Obviously, they stuck with Gareth, and I think, to be fair, paid off. They got Champions League, won a trophy, and got to a final, and weren't too far off in the FA Cup final. And if they'd won that trophy, I think we'd probably be saying pretty decent season. There's always kind of rumours and stuff over players and managers and whether all is well. As I say, I think it's difficult because Gareth's only been in the women's game for 2 years, and he's not got that experience even of being in women's football before. He's sort of coached. I think he coached sort of men's youth teams, whereas even someone like Casey hadn't managed before, but had been in the women's game and had played a whole career and had that sort of respect of players that maybe Gareth needs to earn a bit more, which you might think is fair or unfair. But I think it was even the same with Phil Neville in a way. I think he'd had no experience of women's football, and I think almost sometimes you have to earn that respect. It takes, if you to do a bit more to earn that respect than people that have got that pedigree in the women's game. By the sounds of things, Gareth's still going to be there at the club. Whether that's the reason why some players have left, I don't know. It might be part of it. Again, I think there's a few factors involved. It'll be interesting to see what happens next season, because it is sounding like the club are going to sign. They are going to bring new players in. They're not just going to, Man City aren't a club where they let 5-6 players go and then don't bring anyone else in. I think they will sign players, but I don't think that's just you can't just flick a switch and put 7 players in and say, right, go and play well. You need then a really good manager to gel them all together. The only thing that is on their side is that they've got a very distinctive style of play. So you're not going to have to, people know what City's style of play is. You're not walking into something that you don't know. But I think that turnover is going to be really tricky for them. I think Arsenal might be in a very good position in the summer, given that they're going to retain a lot of players, and there's not going to be that upheaval that there is probably going to be at City and even maybe Chelsea in a way.
Yeah, that is a key question. That's just what I suppose wanted to touch on. There's a lot of upheaval at City, and a lot of United fans are saying, this is the chance. And I'm sure, a lot of seen people in the comments already saying, it's probably Arsenal's time to win it this next season. If you have a proper pre-season, get your players in. I know the Euros is here. It's probably not what clubs want this season, to be honest, but it is what it is. What do you see sort of when you hear people saying, oh, like you just said, Arsenal are probably going to win it, but like Man United, it's a time maybe when there is a lot of upheaval for them to get their act together and get that third spot. I mean, what do you think that they do need? Do you think it's experience? Do you think it's more world class? What do you think that would push United over the line? Because, like you say, it doesn't just click like that. 7 players in with City, so it's another opportunity for the red side of Manchester.
Yeah, I think it's a mix. You always want experience in there because you want players that have been there and done it and won in the past, which is maybe what United are lacking a little bit of, in terms of players that have been there and done it. I think we all probably would say that the club need a striker. I think obviously you've got Russo, who I think you probably want in that central position, or maybe on the side of a front three. But there was a reliance on her and Toon for goals a lot last season, and it felt like, both as young players, and I know they would carry that responsibility anyway. That's a big weight on their shoulders. You kind of want that focal point, that number 9, where you know someone who's going to score you 10, 15 goals a season. Not always easy to find. And then I guess it depends on what happens with the midfield as well. Probably need another central midfielder, creative player, especially depending on what happens with Jackie. And then as we mentioned, another centre back for that experience, because I think one of United's downfalls last season was conceding those late goals in games, dropping points, wins that turned into draws. I think just a little bit of composure and defence. I think Millie Turner being absent for a lot didn't help, because maybe if she'd been there, playing more, we would have had calmer heads at times. And obviously they lost Amy last year as well, which didn't help. So there's always kind of a transition, and we know that Eve is going to be out for a bit as well. So she's not going to be kind of necessarily ready and available come start of the season. So that centre back position, where we saw sort of Katie Zellum filling in and Hayley Ladd at times towards the end of the season, but that's not ideal, really. You don't want them playing out of position for come the first game of the season. So I would say a centre back is probably top priority up there with a forward.
Fair enough. There's a question here from Harry. Harry's boys: are Chelsea going to escape any problems with the takeover? So I think, problems, I think we've heard it's basically going to get done. The government have said, yes, it's happening. But I suppose Vicky's saying here, expect Emma Hayes once the signings finalised, once it goes through. Just what do you see happening with, I suppose, the signings and what Chelsea are doing? And do you see them splashing big money? I mean, between us all here now and listening later, I've heard they definitely want Honor, and they've made the biggest offer for her, but I don't think it's going to happen anymore. But they made that before it was even sold. So what do you see happening with the sale of Chelsea, and how do you see that affecting anything, or do you think just same again?
I think once that's, unless there was any issues that came that came up with that near the end, but I can't see there being. I think it'll be probably business as usual for Chelsea. Emma Hayes was very confident that Maren Mjelde would be signing a new contract. Obviously, she was one that was running out. We saw some players that were out of contract leave, and there was a bit of talk over that. That's because of, I think those players that were leaving were planned, probably. And obviously Maren is, I think, Emma's made it pretty clear she's probably going to sign a new contract. So I think she's been given assurances that they will be in a position to make offers and to sign players. And I don't think Emma would ever settle for not having anything to spend. Not that she's going to go out and buy 5-6 players. I think they will want to strengthen in the midfield area. They've obviously got Leopold's coming back at some point, but how quickly, I don't know. I'm not really sure how far along she is with her pregnancy and how quickly she'd be able to come back. So I think they want a midfielder. Obviously, they've lost G. We don't know whether Beth England's a player that's had a lot of interest, whether she might leave and then they replace her. Obviously, there's been issues over Kirby this season as well. But I would envisage that as long as this takeover goes through like we expect it to, Chelsea should be in a position to sign players and to go out and strengthen, because we know how disappointed they were with how they did in the Champions League last season, and that's the trophy they really want to go out and win.
Definitely, bit of chat for everyone. Do you see more of the United incomings being from overseas opposed from the WSL? I think this has come from Mark saying, he's looking in all different kind of markets. He's looking global. He's looking at, he even mentioned about visas, I think, in one press conference. And, the Scandinavian market, there is a player in there that today, she scored a goal in the cup final. I don't know if they've won, but she's JRK, Joanna Retting, I can't even say her name. But that's, but she's apparently the next big thing in Sweden. That's the one that they're pinning their hopes on. And she's in Sweden. We know their contracts run out in December into January, like we saw with Stina. And a lot of people are saying that might happen. But, from last year, we know United were interested in the summer in Stina. Then they waited till January and then they were gazumped. So, what do you think? Do you think there's someone that Mark has his eye on, and then do you think the club will spend money to get it, or do you think you'll see another like Stina situation? Just your opinions on that question.
I think we will probably see more players from abroad. I think it's difficult to sign players from the WSL clubs unless they're out of contract, because clubs don't really want to, especially now, United are a rival of the top 3. And unless you're buying sort of the next best thing from the clubs below, then, you don't really want to be signing from teams below you unless it's like a really great young player. So I think abroad is, probably more likely. I think there is money there. It's not that like the club are not right. We're not paying at all. I think it's a case of it being the right player, and I think that's maybe why they weren't going to pay a fee for Signe. It's not to say that they won't ever pay a fee for a player. I think it's just a case of it being, if they identify as this is a player we really want, this is a good player that will turn us from a good team to a great team. There is funds there for them to go and buy them. So I wouldn't be too disheartened. Again, I think it's just a case of it being a bit slow and it not being something that's necessarily going to be sort of this week, next week. It's especially with the summer going on as well. I think that Scandinavian market is a good place for WSL clubs to go. I think we've seen Everton utilise it quite well. I know obviously they didn't have a great season, but I mean Hannah Bennison is still going to be a player. She's only sort of, I think, 19. She's a long-term player, so I think they did well getting her. There's definitely players in that league that I think United could get, and I think So I know Mark, as you say, talking about global and visas, and obviously Brexit sometimes complicates things with points and stuff like that. But I would say kind of players from abroad is probably more likely than sort of taken from domestic rivals.
There's something there you just touched on, and it brings me to something that I heard. I don't know if you know, but like I have heard United have gone in for a player that's recently been released. I don't want to like start saying names, because if I say, but you're saying about free and all this, and she played a lot this season. Should I say her name, Kathryn? Unless you know. I don't even get Sarri. That's who I heard they were in for. So I don't know if you heard about that, but I think it would be like a backup that they would sign.
Who is that, sorry?
You know, the Birmingham one, Sarri.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I don't think it would have been a top signing, but you know, you're talking about that you don't think they're going to back, but they did sign Thomas. They did sign, you know, they'd signed a lot of players from, say, like Chelsea let go players. They've signed a lot of players like that. They've signed a lot of players that say Arsenal don't want them anymore, Chelsea don't want them anymore, City don't want them anymore. Or then, like you say, Thomas, this one, that one. What, you know, do you think that Mark's moving away from that kind of model now then?
Well, yeah, I think he wants to. Whether that transpires or not, I don't know. But I think we've heard Mark say that, you know, talk about investment, and I think maybe that's a plea to the board, you know, to put a little bit more pressure on. And I think we know, you know, he's made it very clear, you know, what he wants. That doesn't necessarily mean he's just going to get given a pot of money, but I think, you know, Mark's an experienced manager. It's not like he's come in and it's his first job. He knows how the women's game works, and I think he deserves that backing. If it doesn't work, then, you know, fair enough. But I think if you're going to hire someone, you're going to get them over from America, where he was, you know, doing quite well at the time. Then I think he deserves that backing, and I think that's probably how he views it as well. So I don't think he'll just sort of sit there and be like, okay, I'll have no money and that'll be fine. I think he'll keep that pressure on, but obviously he'll have to, you know, he's not going to get given, as I say, a pot of gold necessarily. But that doesn't also mean that he'll not necessarily go for those players that are available, as you say, like, you know, Sarri would be a player that would, again, maybe make sense on the grounds that it's a free, did quite well at Birmingham. Is not a case of she's been released. She's probably, you know, she's a player that did, you know, she's not going to play in the Championship because she's too, you know, way too good for that level. And it could be a player that, you know, again, could be, as you say, a rotation player. One thing I think United have struggled with in the last couple of seasons is if injuries come in, sometimes the backup options aren't, you know, always at the level. And you do need a bigger squad in this league to compete, as I think we saw Arsenal had a much bigger squad than they ever had under Joe last season, and I think that did make a difference. But that's to say, I think Mark will be given some money to spend. How much and whether he then gets the target that he wants with that is you know, not sure. But as I say, I think Mark, as we say, he's spoken a lot about it, and I don't think he's just going to sort of roll over and accept not getting anything. So I would, you know, not be too despondent that maybe some of the early targets haven't come in, because, as I say, there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, no, and I think, you know, seeing people saying, sorry, Paris, this isn't what they expected, but I don't think that will end up the window with people like that. Just a team that has been catching my eye, not for any reason, but their fans are very vocal, I've noticed, and they've been tagging me and things. Liverpool, how do you see it going for them? I saw there was a comment and he said I better ask some questions. So what, you know, I've seen Liverpool fans telling me this morning they're going to finish in the top 6. So just your views, Kathryn, on Liverpool. What do you think they're going to do? Do you think they're going to have a good season? I can see them fighting with Leicester. I think it's going to be because I think this is the first season that we've not had no disrespect now to Bristol or Birmingham, but you sort of maybe saw them happening. Now I think it's very towards the bottom. I think Villa could get dragged back into it. Reading might, if they don't, you know, because they're the only sort of Championship club there, but they've got quite a good budget. You know, even with Everton, if they don't get it right with this new manager, doesn't matter what kind of players you've got, you know, I think management is key. And I suppose just for anyone who's watching Leicester or anyone's interested in the bottom of the table, do you see, what's her face? I forget her name, the manager of Leicester staying there. And what do you think of Liverpool?
I don't think Liverpool are going to go mad with money. I think Matt Beard knows that. I think he even said when they got promoted, it's very difficult for promoted teams they always have that ambition to, like Leicester had it last season, where we want to go up and we don't want to be competing for relegation. But I think a lot of the time the first season has got to be consolidation. make sure you stay in the league and then look to build. The only difference was when we had United, but and you kind of already had almost a WSL team in some ways, and then kind of went up and obviously got that fourth spot. But most of the time it is about consolidating and just making sure you stay in the WSL. I can't see. I'd be surprised if Liverpool suddenly parachuted and went against the mould unless they're going to spend kind of ridiculous amounts of money. And I know they are maybe, have learned from the past in terms of they are, a little bit more committed now. But I still think it's even sort of the signings they made last year were sort of, it wasn't like blowing clubs out of the water. I think the wages I think maybe they pay quite good wages in, compared to some other teams. But I can't see them, going mad. But what they have got in Matt Beard is someone that's very experienced in the league, more so than Lydia Bedford. I think is obviously a young coach and has done, a reasonable job. But I think Leicester were very lucky to stay up at the end on the grounds that they had that game at Birmingham where Emily Ramsey got sent off, unjustifiably. So made a big impact in the relegation fight, and Birmingham did actually start playing sort of fairly well towards the end, whereas Leicester, it was like you couldn't see them getting any points, and it was just almost a bit of luck that they'd got that result earlier on that sort of kept them up. So I would think, unless again I can't see them going mad, I would expect them to be sort of down there. I'm interested to see how West Ham do now. Ollie Harder's gone, Paul Konchesky, no real experience of management. A few players leaving, people like Julie Flaherty, who's been there a long time, experienced. You wouldn't expect West Ham to be dragged down there, but
Everton did.
Exactly. And again, I think sometimes you clubs like Reading and clubs like Aston Villa that have got Gemma and Carla that have got that experience. Yeah, they might not have the biggest budgets. They might not, they're probably going to be in around that middle area. They might get dragged in for a period of time, but you'd always probably put your faith in them, and you'd probably back them to keep the clubs up. Maybe not by a huge way, but you'd probably back them to do it. Whereas it's hard to know with people like Paul Konchesky at West Ham how that's going to go. They could find themselves dragged in. Again, clubs like Brighton, you wouldn't expect to get pulled in. So I think Liverpool, their fans probably think they should, just throw a bit of money in it and go for it. But I think it's got to be look at, staying up first and try and stay up as quickly as you can, and maybe have a run in the cup or something like that. But I'd expect Leicester, Liverpool to be sort of, fighting a little bit, maybe West Ham down there. Very hard to know right now because clubs haven't sort of consolidated their squads, but it'd be interesting to see how that goes.
No, it's a good shout what you said about West Ham, because I had them as the top six because they did finish sixth, like I totally forgot. Ollie's left, Gilly's left, and then Paul's a new manager. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes. This one, and I do see comments, and I've seen a lot of people asking over different clubs, but Fran Bentley, we've heard today. So I've got to mention it. Gary has said that she's looking like she's going to stay. He said to me, it looks like a transfer, but then Man United are also going to put in like a buyback or a sell-on option, which is good because obviously she's still young. She's in the under-23 squad. Who knows what could happen? But what's her face has come back. Ramsey's come back, in my opinion. I think Bentley started probably better at Bristol. She's been solid throughout, but I just think Ramsey towards the end of the WSL, which I did expect, has really shone for Birmingham. I mean, she kept it down. It's just that penalty really at Chelsea, but I didn't see the game fully, but, I think she was made some big saves. Brighton was player of the match, made big saves when they got the points there. Like you say, unfortunate at Leicester. Who knows? It could have been a lot different if she had stayed on the pitch. But she's one that needs to play, in my opinion, though, because I think we saw, it took her a while to get into that stride, to get into this top form. So have you heard that Bentley's going to go to Bristol? And just generally, what do you think is going to happen with the keepers? Do you think Rambo's going to stay? Is Rambo, Bagley, and then obviously Mary. What do you think next season with the keepers for United?
Yeah, I mean, I saw obviously Tom's story on that. I mean, I think it would make sense. I think it's a deal that would suit all parties, especially if there's a chance for her to maybe go back to the club at some point. I think her and Emily are both keepers that, as we say, need to play, because you've got Sophie there as consolidated number 2, and Mary's not going unless Mary gets an injury. That would be the only thing. Mary gets injured in the Euros, and then suddenly you've got Bagley promoted to number 1. You've then got to keep sort of Ramsey as number 2. But assuming that doesn't happen, Mary's the out and out number 1. Very difficult to get past her. Then you've got Bagley, I think, is a very able deputy at number 2, and then you never really want to be a keeper that's third choice, because Bagley's probably going to play those Conti Cup games, maybe some of the FA Cup games if they're against lower league teams. So I could see Ramsey maybe going on loan again, as did this season, just for game time, and then maybe again reassess at Christmas, or you probably have an option to maybe recall if they did get an injury to Bagley or to Work.
Yeah. People are saying that they rate Brett. I don't even know. I mean, Lanzell said something that I've always felt. Rambo's the future number 1, and I've always felt that for a bit. I felt it before even lockdown happened. She went on loan to Sheffield. Obviously, then Vicky saying Rambo's a high ceiling. I mean, what do you think can you see Rambo being a number 1 at United eventually? I don't know how much you saw of her at Birmingham, but do you think she's got that potential to do it, or?
Yeah, I think she's definitely got the potential. It's just a case of what happens with Mary. Mary's only 28, I think, which is 27, 28. Young and still in the goalkeeper terms. Goalkeepers can go on to sort of their mid 30s, but then Mary might leave at some point. She might not be at United forever. But at the minute she's England's number 1, and you'd be hard placed to displace her in the next sort of few years. It would only be if Mary decided to leave, to go elsewhere, to go abroad. But I think, I say, I would sort of agree with those comments. I saw a bit of Ramsey actually when she was at Sheffield United, because I was over in Sheffield at the time, and was quite really impressed with how she played. I think she's got that potential there. Obviously, still very young. And for goalkeepers as well, like you probably never, you always seem to be the number 1 later on in your career. For the big club, you have to go and get that experience at other clubs first. But I'd quite like to see her stay and just maybe go on loan again this season, and then just a case of maybe reassessing, where people stand. I'm not sure what contract Mary's on actually when that ends, and whether she would want to stay or go. I can't see her wanting to go right now. She's very settled. But she could get injured. I know, as I keep saying it, you never know. You never know with these things. You might get your chance. Look at Man City this season. They couldn't get a keeper to save their lives at one point. So you never know what might happen.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I want to wrap up, Kathryn, but is there anything that you want to sort of add? Anything that, or if anyone wants to jump in the comments, any last words? Or, I mean, do you see it? When do you see it heating up? When do you see the actual, the bids to be made? I mean, they could be being made now, but when do you think we'll see the full swing, full flow?
I don't want to sound sort of pessimistic, but I think a lot of it is probably after the Euros, we'll see things go up a level. I think we should hopefully see some contracts news before the Euros, especially on a couple, because I think this should be straightforward. And then hopefully there might be a couple of contracts that get done after the Euros, but I think most should be hopefully done before. And then, I think after that tournament finishes is when we'll see most deals done. But all I would say is that I know there's maybe some disappointing news at the start, but I think don't try not to read too much into it, because necessarily the players they've not got might not necessarily be the top targets. And as I say, there's still a very long way to go in the window.
No, 100%, 100%. And, you know, it's their loss. Even if they did want to come, but we didn't get them, but it's still their loss. So that's all that matters. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in. You've been great. Let us know. Jump in the comments. Jump on Twitter if there's anything that you want, any questions, any people, you know, just always let us know. It's your show as well, guys. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kathryn. Thanks everyone for watching. See you soon.